All right, the time is now 3:11 p.m. on November 6th, calling to order the meeting of the Warwick Public Schools, Warwick School Committee Fiscal Subcommittee meeting. At this time, I'll do a quick roll call. Superintendent Danbrook, Assistant Superintendent McCaffrey,
Present.
Director of IT Compliance Inspection, Dr. Taylor.
Here.
Director of Finance.
Here.
Raymel White, Chris Mark, Sean Galligan. We have a quorum present. We'll do the open with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. We have two items of business before this committee. First item, discussion action. Financial plan, Mr. Bold.
So as in some other meetings and to be discussed a little bit in more detail here as well, the district has been trending in the direction in the past couple of years of being over budget and salaries. So we've been progressively more over budget on salaries each of the past 4 years. And so the administration has met a number of times to discuss the situation itself and what a go forward plan looks like for the remainder of the year, in order to minimize any sort of deficit. So my strong recommendation is that we halt spending for the district, discretionary spending for the district through the month of December, in order to give the administration, school committee a little bit more time to discuss what the second half of the year looks like. And it also gives us almost 2 months to really figure out and narrow down what the overall projected number for the year is going to be. I feel relatively confident in the salary projections that we put together. But when it comes to our non-staffing budget, it's $40 million, but $22 million of that is out of district tuitions and transportation. So you're already less than 50% of your non-staffing budget that you're actually able to touch. And even some of that, the 18 million left over, is still wrapped up in required curriculum and things like that. So halting any sort of discretionary spending gives us a few months to really dig into the detail of the budget that we put together for fiscal year 25 to come up with an action plan for really starting to solve the deficit issue.
Okay.
And that, again, I think that's within the administration's right to implement a halt in spending, but we will discuss this at the public school committee meeting next week as well.
Any members of the committee with questions or comments?
So you mentioned discretionary spending as our target, which makes sense. That's because we're locked into, it's a staffing salary issue.
Yep.
But there's limited amount that we can do at this stage with that.
Agreed. My opinion is that contracts are contracts. They should be honored. There are instances where other districts do reopen negotiations and talk to the unions with which they've negotiated contracts in the past. Is an option. Everything's on the table, I think, at this point. My interpretation is sort of you're only as good as your word. And if you signed a contract, you honor the contract. Because if you go back on it now, then future contract negotiations, I don't feel like have the merit behind them that you would want. So that's my opinion. But again, I think everything is on the table at this point.
And then what are some examples of discretionary spending versus not discretionary spending, just for the public who might be watching this? Obviously, we have lease payments and heating expenses, and just, can you just talk a little bit about the differences for everybody?
So I would say non-discretionary spending is going to be sort of like the items I had discussed earlier, out of district tuitions, transportation expenses, like we need to get kids to and from school. Any sort of utility bills, we need to keep the schools either cool or hot, depending on the season. Ride required curriculum. We can't just not teach the curriculum that the state Department of Education says we need to teach. Non-discretionary spending would be, discretionary spending would be things like athletic uniforms, the improvements to certain facilities that we budgeted for in the general fund this year, classroom supplies, basically anything that the school district could do without and continue to operate. That's how I would describe it.
Cool, thanks.
Do you have anything?
So over the next month and a half, you're gonna devise a plan to bring forward to the finance
So
committee and the committee?
the plan is to start to communicate this issue a little bit more broadly. And the central administration team, school committee, need to sit down, talk about tough discussions, like what are we willing to do without for the remainder of the year in order to minimize the situation or the impact of the situation. And if this is going to be a deficit, which I anticipate it will, we also need to start to discuss with the city and partner with the city on a plan forward too. So basically just getting everybody involved. It's a difficult situation, but we have to solve it. I don't think there's room for like finger pointing, blaming, excuses, things like that. It'll happen, but I think administration's role is to sort of block out the noise and just move forward with a plan that makes sense for the district.
Just to follow up to that, if I may, we're not, I hear it's kind of, obviously a big topic, but I feel like I hear that amongst many communities, right? I mean, there's a lot of communities that are facing similar struggles. I didn't know if Providence was in the news in other districts, and it's not uncommon. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I was reading up on some articles prior to this meeting, and in fiscal year 23, 34% of school districts across the country ran deficits.
Okay. That
was in a year where there was federal funding. So it's not uncommon for school districts to run deficits in general. And in a year where federal funds disappeared and are no longer available in order to help subsidize budgets, that 34% number, I would presume, is going to go up. There's going to be more schools running deficits this year than there were in the prior 3 years.
Well, it's good that we're on it now, as opposed to at the end of the fiscal year.
Yep. This is it's a situation to manage, just like any other. It's a difficult situation, but we're going to manage it.
Thank you.
Anything else? So I did speak with Mr. Bold a couple times over the past several days, but probably more than I wanted to, more than he wanted to. So personally, where I stand on this is, first and foremost, the goal is to not have a deficit, which I think everybody here is looking for. So that means I'm going to be looking at the administration to close what he's forecasting as a deficit to, actual budgeted figure for FY25. I like where Dr. Taylor was going. I think when this plan comes before the full committee, which first I'll say the plan itself, I support, freezing discretionary spend through the remainder of the year. I support that. But I think Dr. Taylor hit the nail on the head. We need to make sure that the public and the school committee understands what is discretionary versus non-discretionary. And so your examples are good. And I think in full committee would be better, because I believe that full committee gets slightly more views or more attendance than the subcommittee meetings. Next, I would say, in addition to evaluating our personnel, I'd really like, as part of the plan for the, when we get into 2025 after January, I'd like if all budget managers come together with the administration, within the administration, and I want some recommended expenditures to be reduced. I think there's some line items that are slightly inflated. I think what we need to really start, kind of almost like zero-based budgeting, which will be complex because you guys will obviously be working through that exercise while at the same time building your FY26 budget. So it's going to be a lot of work. But unfortunately, we're in these circumstances. So I just think there's opportunity there for us to kind of continue to close that deficit number by maybe removing some of the nice to have items, best practices, expenses associated with those best practices. I think obviously we like them, but we need to try to close that gap a little bit because we are going to be looking for additional financial assistance from the city on the construction of the new high school. So I don't think we can continue to hit the city, multiple times. And they're facing the same challenges as the school districts. The emergency funds received from the feds in the state are gone now. They expire at the end of the month of December. So it's going to be on us to kind of right the ship. Nobody's going to walk through the door with one of those giant novelty checks and address our financial issues. So I want to see some line item reductions as our financial plan comes together. And then one thing that's going to be big for me is, so we balanced our budget. We received additional state aid. The $1 million question that's going to come from this, and I'm not looking for an answer now. I think the administration really needs to do a deep dive, but this will be a question that I will ask publicly, is we only retained one TA of the TAs that we proposed cutting. Now, over the past several months, we've brought some back, but we were told that the figure for eliminating those positions was around like $3 million approximately. Now, what we really need to hear is what is the deficit that we're facing? And if it's greater than $3 million, what is making up that difference? Because, it's a common sense question to ask. If we balanced our budget and we brought back all those people that we initially cut to be balanced, and then a few others, well, how do those few others make up whatever the difference is?
Yep.
And if it's more than that, well, what is it? And so I think that's going to be very important for us to know. If it's personnel related, or if it's driven by IEPs, that's something we can go back to the city with and with the community, and to the community and say, this is why your number went up.
Yep.
But if it's, poor management or not identifying certain costs, operational expenses, obviously that's going to hurt us, when we're trying to sell it and look as, knowledgeable experts on this stuff. So those would just be my few remarks. Not looking for an answer now because, you've presented a plan before the committee today. And that plan is that you're going to freeze discretionary spend from now through the end of the year. And that, I also appreciate the update that you guys are looking into it. And, I don't envy any of you because you're going to be doing twice the work now. So this is where we get into those extensive work weeks that we hear about. Because we're going to have to be building the FY26 budget while also correcting the FY25 budget. So, with that, I'll make the motion to adopt the recommendation by Mr. Bull to present the action plan to full committee at the upcoming November 13th meeting, seconded by Mr. McCaffrey. Any other comments? Any objections? All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. So the action plan is now presented to full committee for vote. Next item on the agenda, we have FY25 percent budget utilization year to date.
So at this point this year, we've spent about 23, and this is actual expenditures, not encumbrances. We've spent about 23% of the overall budget, which is $191 million. At the same time last year, so end of October of fiscal year 24, we had spent about 21%. So we're close to, but a little bit ahead of where we were last year. I would attribute a lot of that to the fact that at the same point, or between the same time periods, we've spent about 6.5% more on salary. It's our largest expense. So I would say that makes up the majority of that 2% difference in terms of what we've spent year over year. And yeah, that's where I would leave it with the utilization.
Okay. Any comments, questions? All right, great. Appreciate the updates. I appreciate the financial plan. I look forward to, on the financial plan, just go back for a second. Do you think you'll have, when do you think you'll have kind of an idea of kind of a more structured plan of a path forward to being balanced, or worst case scenario, what our deficit would be?
Yeah, I think we work through the next 2 months in order to present at the beginning of January what the second half of the year looks like. I don't want to say we could put together a pretty rough plan over the next week or two, but I think taking as much time as we need in order to put something together that's more thoughtful.
So you think the January fiscal subcommittee meeting, you could have something 2 months from today?
Yeah.
Okay, just so that way we don't lose any more of the financial year.
Yep.
All right. Great. With that, we're on to public comment. We have several people in attendance today, so just please don't sit there. Just hop on up if you have a question or a comment. Individual comments will be respectfully limited to 3 minutes per person, with public comment not to exceed 45 minutes. So the content of the comments will not be restricted. It's the hope of this committee that citizens, committee members, and administration alike will be respectful of each other's right to speak, tolerant of different points of view, and mindful of everyone's time. So, any members of the public wishing to comment? Any members of the public wishing to comment? Any members of the public wishing to comment? Seeing none, our next meeting is Monday, December 2nd, 2024 at 3 p.m. Eastern. I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn. So moved. Made by Dr. Taylor, seconded by Mr. McCaffrey. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. We're adjourned.